What's up, everybody? This is part 2 of a 2-part series on a leather satchel that I built specifically with my iPad Pro in mind. That's it back there. Obviously, you can use it for whatever you want to use it for, and you can find the pattern and artwork for this project on my website. Link in the description down below. I'll put a link here, and there'll also be a link. I can't put 2 links. There'll be a link to part 1 somewhere, and there'll be a link to the website somewhere. I'm sure you guys could figure it out. It's really not that complicated. As usual, this video is sponsored by LONSDALE Leather. Be sure to check the link in the description of this video for their website to see various tools and leather. As some of you may recall, there was a bit of a mishap with part 1, and I decided to tear off the whole back strip of this bag and make it so that the rolled edge is just on the front flap, and obviously the front of the bag itself, but not on the back. I was really worried about it, but I had to do it because it just looked like garbage. But because of the kind of leather it is, this is a oil tan, a bit of a pull-up quality, it's got some suppleness. It turned out okay, actually. The holes that you would have noticed a lot on a vegetable tan or Latigo bag really didn't show up that much on this one because of how supple the leather was. So now I'm just going to sand it and try and clean it up with a beveler to make it look half decent and not like a pile of garbage. And I think I did a pretty good job of it. Still using a number 2 beveler here. If you get a close-up look, yeah, you can see the holes, but they're so hard to see, and I probably could rub those out, or with some time it'll kind of disappear. I've decided to use an antler tip. I'll link those antler tips in my Amazon storefront. I got a bag of 50 of them for a pretty good price, so maybe that'll help you guys out. I punch holes first on corners like this, so I don't overcut. I don't want to like slice through both sides awkwardly. I want to just pull out from those holes. Now, if I had already set this up ahead of time, this would have been a little easier, but as it stands, it was a little finicky to get all this lined up and cut and beveled nicely. Now I'm just going to dye it, awkwardly wax it, and awkwardly burnish it. It ends up alright. With a bit of wear, it'll look better. Just needs time to burnish out on its own naturally. Back to the sewing machine. I want to stitch this down so it doesn't separate at all. Wasn't in the original plan, so it's a little awkward, but I got it done. I've been using 2 types of leather here. I've got the Vegetan with the dark brown, and I've got that oil tan in the lighter color. The oil tan is not a good idea for this because of how supple it is. You want your loop to sit nice and rigid, or at least have a nice shape to it, so when you put your front flap over it, it doesn't squish it or become awkward. So this way, because it's Vegetan, it'll hold its shape better, and you'll be able to find that spot easy and put your antler tip in. I always try and make sure I overstitch those edges whenever there's an edge, because I don't want the 2 pieces of leather to separate at all. There, it seems to work out pretty good. And you can see the edge looks nice. I'm using an 8-ounce Vegetan here for the strap. I want it to be sturdy enough that it's not going to stretch, and I want to stay the same with my colors, keep it color coordinated, so the strap, the idea is it's going to be the same color as the other Vegetan pieces, or at least close to it. Now that we've got all these strips cut out, I'm going to measure around my torso, get a general idea of the size I want for these straps, and then do a little bit of shaping and beveling, punch some holes, and make sure with a final check that everything lines up appropriately before dyeing it and final assembly on the shoulder strap. Obviously, a strap this wide is not going to be very good on a bag with a narrow gusset, or, well, even if it had a wide gusset, I really wouldn't want a strap that wide connecting directly to the bag. So we're going to taper everything down at the ends so they can attach to smaller D-rings and mount to the gusset of the bag. This means both your tongue end and your buckle end are going to taper, and they're going to be the same size. I think they're down to a 3/4 inch here is what I get to. Since this is a $19 pattern on my website, I just wanted to take this time to remind everybody that on my Patreon, people pay $9 for patterns and artwork, or $5 for either patterns or artwork. And it's on a month-to-month basis. So this pattern is released this month on my Patreon. So people paying $5 for patterns get this pattern without art. People paying $9 for patterns get this pattern with art. And that's not just for this pattern. It's anything I release during that specific month goes to those people paying on Patreon. So the cat might be out of the bag now, we'll see, but I figured I would explain it a little more to you guys. I decided to patina this solid brass hardware because I wanted to look like the antique brass hardware. I have a video on how to use jacks. It's pretty straightforward. Check the link above there. But you can see here with the D-ring that it turned out almost exactly the same color. So it's a really easy process. To speed things up, I'm going to dip dye everything. I'm using this light brown Phoebing's Pro Dye. I really like Pro Dye. It doesn't streak as much as the regular dyes. I'm just going to dye this stuff twice and move on from there. After it's dried, we're going to hit it with some beeswax and burnish up all the edges on these pieces. I'm going to use my motorized burnisher for this process. It makes quick work of the smaller pieces. But stuff like a belt is pretty hard to burnish properly on one of these. It's just a little cumbersome. So what I did is I made this little jig that I can rest my belt in and burnish along it with a hand burnisher. And all it does is it keeps the belt from flexing so that it stays fairly straight and you get a good rub along the edge. Now we're just going to buff up any marks, and then it'll be all ready to put a finish on it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 coats of the finish on it that I used on the carved pieces I did, and then that's going to be it. If you wanted to be really picky, after your finish dried, you could put a little rub of that antique stain on top, and then put another finish on top of that, just to make sure your color is spot on. Now we're sewing this keeper together. What I do for keepers is punch my holes and then fold the keeper flush reverse so the inside is on the outside, and then I stitch it together, and after that I invert it back to its normal side, and the stitches are all nice and even and it looks good. And it's really easy since everything's lined up and it's easy to stitch. I think around here is where I get some comments about my cuticles again. If anybody wants to hook me up with a manicure, I won't object, but I'll probably destroy that manicure and have my fingers back to the same within a week. Of course, these holes are already on the pattern when you download it, but since I'm creating this bag from scratch on the day, I'm just kind of winging it from time to time. I got this little piece from Bronze Hammer. There'll be a link in the description down below. They've got a lot of buckles and findings, a lot of Viking stuff. It's pretty cool. I'm using my Fordham here. Just make sure that you wear proper eye protection, and also always take your time when drilling stuff like this, because there's always a chance that if you're not being like super careful, it could go like fly. Oh jeez. Yeah, I'm gonna find my safety glasses really quick. It even broke the tip off of that thing. Jesus. Well, it all worked out in the end, though. It fit. I bent it into place, and then I just squeezed it in with these pliers. Obviously, we can't just take that antler tip out and put it in our pocket, so I'm going to hang it from a thin strip of leather that is going to be riveted to the back of the bag. Nice and simple, and it'll just hang there when the bag's open. Yeah, I'm being a little weird with my breakdown on the bag, just scuffing it up a bit. It was looking a little too clean. Can't have that. Rounding off the edge, I'm going to center up a hole and punch it. There you go, everybody. Part 2 is complete. I'm really happy with how this bag turned out. Challenged me. I made mistakes that I recovered from, which was great. Hopefully you guys learned something as well. Make sure you hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. People underestimate that. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos, and also hit the notification button so you don't miss any of my videos, because otherwise you don't know when I release something, and that would suck for me and you, really. Oh yeah, and until next time, keep on being creative in whatever it is you do.